The purpose of this program is to familiarize line maintenance people with the CFM56-5c engine, and specifically with the location of the different line replaceable units. Let's walk around one engine. The nacelle of the engine consists of the inlet cowl, the fan cowls, the thrust reverser cowls, the exhaust nozzle, the mixer, and the center body. On the left-hand side, we find the oil tank access door and the two left pivoting doors. On the right-hand side, we find the fan compartment pressure relief door, the starter air valve spring-loaded access door, and the two right pivoting doors. The drain mast protrudes from the bottom of the nacelle. Each drain is clearly identified by name, printed on the cowl. The fan cowls, then the thrust reverser cowls must be opened for access to the engine sensors, valves, and accessories. Visible at the front of the engine are the spinner front cone, the spinner rear cone, with threaded inserts for the installation of balancing screws, the fan blades, and behind them are the outlet guide vanes, or OGVs. The fan inlet temperature is measured by the T12 sensor. The static pressure is taken at 3 locations 120 degrees apart, linked by a flexible hose. Looking at the fan case area on the left-hand side, we find the oil tank with a gravity filler cap, a sight gauge, 2 remote filling ports, and the oil quantity transmitter, the oil anti-siphon device, the hydraulic filter with a visual pop-out clogging indicator, the integrated drive generator, or IDG, oil cooler, the fuel return valve, or FRV, the oil pressure switch, the oil pressure transmitter, the hydraulic low pressure switch, and the fuel filter differential pressure switch. On the right-hand side, we find the electronic control unit, or ECU, with the electrical connectors, the pressure flexible hoses, and the engine identification plug. 2 ignition exciters, the remote charge converter, or RCC, the engine data plate, the bearing number 1 vibration sensor electrical connector, the N1 speed sensor, the forward sump oil drain, the starter air valve, and the anti-ice valve. The accessory gearbox, or AGB, mounted accessories are, on the front face, from left to right, the IDG, the ECU control alternator, the hydraulic pump, the lube unit, with the main oil supply filter, the backup filter, the master chip detector, or MCD, the oil temperature sensor, and the supply filter clogging indicator. Above the control alternator is the hand cranking pad cover. On the aft face, from left to right, is the fuel package, which is comprised of the fuel pump with the fuel filter, the hydromechanical unit, or HMU, the main oil fuel heat exchanger, the servo fuel heater, the fuel flow transmitter. Also on the aft face is the starter. At the bottom of the AGB is the N2 speed sensor and the drain plug. One of the 2 main frames of the engine is the fan frame. Within it, we find the variable bleed valve, or VBV system, which includes the VBV doors, which are located between the frame struts below the fan duct panels, the fuel gear motor, the stop mechanism, the position sensor, and the feedback rod. The PT25 sensor is located just below the fuel gear motor. The fan frame also supports the engine forward mount. Looking at the engine core area, on the left-hand side, we find the low air pressure check valve, the high pressure regulating valve, the bleed pressure regulating valve, the 8 o'clock variable stator vane, or VSV, bell crank and actuator assembly, the rotor active clearance and start bleed valve, or RACSB valve, and the bleed bias sensor, or WB3 sensor transducers. Around the combustor case are the WB3 venturi, the fuel nozzles, the two fuel manifolds, the fuel nozzle's drain manifold, the left igniter plug, the PS3 tapping, the T3 sensor, and the left T-case sensor. On the right-hand side, we find the high-pressure turbine clearance control valve, or HPT-CC valve, the low-pressure turbine clearance control valve, LPT-CC valve, the 2 o'clock VSV bell crank and actuator assembly, the fuel distribution block, the compressor case forward flange, or CCFF vibration sensor, and at the bottom of the core, the burner staging valve, or BSV, and the core compartment temperature sensor. On the combustor case are the second igniter plug, the second T-case sensor, and the fuel nozzles. Looking at the low-pressure turbine area, we find the axial flow bulkhead, and just behind it are the exhaust gas temperature, or EGT, sensor harnesses. Mounted on the second main frame of the engine, the turbine rear frame, or TRF, is the T5 sensor. Routed through the TRF 6 o'clock strut are the rear sump oil supply tube, the oil scavenge tube, and the oil drain tube. The TRF also supports the engine rear mount. Coming back to the nacelle and integrated with the two thrust reverser C-ducts, we find the hydraulic junction box, the pivoting doors hydraulic actuators, the pivoting doors latch mechanisms, the stow switches, the deploy switches. Close to the pylon are the hydraulic control unit, or HCU, the HCU filter, and the HCU manual lockout lever. The engine is equipped with fire detector assemblies for the fan compartment, the core compartment, and the LPT compartment. Borescope inspection ports are available all along the engine. 2 within the booster area at the 4 o'clock position, 1 per high-pressure compressor stator stage at the 5 o'clock position with the exception of the 9th stage, 4 around the combustion chamber, plus the 2 igniter ports, 2 for the high-pressure turbine, and 1 for each low-pressure turbine nozzle stage at the 5 o'clock position. This completes the line replaceable units identification of the CFM56-5c.